We have made a good start, but it falls to you to take our nation across the finish line, to make the promise of educational equity and excellence a reality for every child in every classroom in this country every day. For the next few minutes, I'd like to share with you my thoughts about how you and we must go about doing this vitally important work. First, we must prepare all our children for large futures, not small ones. According to the Alliance for Excellent Education, an estimated 85% of current jobs and almost 90% of the fastest growing and the best paid jobs require some post-secondary education, most requiring a bachelor's degree or higher. Cultural anthropologist Jennifer James states that 80% of the jobs available in the future will be cerebral and only 20% manual, the exact opposite of the ratio in 1900. There is simply no place in the new global economy for adults who cannot think critically and strategically, who lack problem-solving skills, and who cannot create new products, goods, and services. We have no idea how the next technological innovations will impact our lives, but today's students must be able to thrive in that unknown world, whatever it looks like, and you are the ones who have to prepare them for it. Many great minds predicted that we would one day place a man on the moon. However, not a single one predicted that much of the world would be watching this historic event on television. Our world has changed beyond our wildest imagination. The only major surviving institution that has not radically transformed itself in the last 30 years, unfortunately, is our education system. In its policy paper comparing the performance of U.S. students with that of 35 other developed nations, McGraw-Hill reports that simply narrowing the achievement gap between the U.S. and other participating nations by bringing all U.S. students to a level of minimal proficiency could result in gross domestic product increases for our nation of $72 trillion. Talk about a plan to reduce the deficit. Both the moral and the economic imperatives to deliver a quality education to each child in this nation demand that every student graduates from high school with a solid foundation for post-secondary and career success. Decades ago, Franklin Roosevelt said, "We cannot always build a future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future." This is precisely your charge as the nation's present and future education leaders. The second area I want to focus on briefly is to successfully create and navigate a new educational landscape as we need human capital. I think we finally come to understand that the quality of our education system is mostly dependent on the knowledge, the talents, and commitment of the people like you who will teach and lead our schools. When I began my career, my parents had to force themselves to contain their pride as they responded to the question, "Well, what does your daughter do?" They replied with understated joy, "She's a teacher." Now, too often, you ask parents and young teachers what their children do for a living, and they reply just as quietly, but sometimes not as proudly, "Well, right now she's teaching." The implication, of course, is clear until something better comes along. I know that each guest here is rightfully proud of the hard work and accomplishments of their child, mother, father, grandchild, or spouse. But I wonder how many of you realize that your loved one is a hero, that the well-being of our nation rests in their hands, that just as we honor and support our brave men and women who fight for our freedom abroad, as a nation, we must honor and support our educators who are fighting to ensure that the future of our nation and its citizens is secure by preparing students who can effectively compete in a global marketplace. As UNC graduates, you are among the best and the brightest, prepared for one of the most critical professions in our nation by one of its finest institutions. But we need tens of thousands more just like you. Our political leaders at every level must work together to adopt policies that encourage our best young minds to enter teaching, to relieve them of the burden of crippling debt in return for their dedicated service, and support them on the pathway from novice teacher to master educator. Finally, to successfully navigate today's education landscape, we absolutely must close the achievement gap and guarantee educational excellence and equity for all students. If schools are to be what Horace Mann called them, the great equalizers that compensate for the inequalities of birth, then this is their challenge. Do you realize the American labor force will be even more diverse in 2008 than it is today? Over the next 7 years, the number of whites in the workforce is projected to increase by less than 6%. The number of African Americans will increase by 14%, and the number of Hispanics by 33%. Yet, Hispanics and African Americans are the ones least well served by our school system. Fewer than 17% of African American and Latino students finish high school and graduate from college. This disconnect between who is available to work in the near future and who is adequately prepared to engage in meaningful work must be resolved if our country is to remain economically viable. Every educator must develop high levels of cultural competence to effectively navigate the 21st century education landscape. Each of you will leave this place today to work in schools and systems that are geographically, demographically, and socioeconomically diverse from each other, but I'm willing to bet that every one of them has as part of its mission or major goals the education of all children at high levels. If the American public education system is serious about destroying intellectual segregation of current and future generations of children, its leaders must take specific actions to deal with issues of inequity related to class, race, native language, and even geography once and for all. Hamid Escalante, one of the nation's most extraordinary teachers, when told that his poor Latino students could not learn calculus, that they would become frustrated, that it would be dangerous for their self-esteem, replied, "When you are 16 or 17 years old, growing up in the barrios of East Los Angeles, there are many things that are dangerous, but calculus certainly isn't one of them." Escalante knew that to teach his students well, he had to first shift his perspective. He had to look at them and see assets where others had seen deficits. He had to accept them as whole beings with limitless potential, whose belief, values, and behaviors were the reflection of a cultural orientation that has meaning, richness, and coherence. He understood that he had to see them fully before he could teach them well. As teachers, counselors, speech pathologists, as principals and supervisors, as superintendents and central office administrators, as university faculty and staff, do you see your students fully? Do you know how to build the capacity of your staffs and colleagues so that they see culture as an asset rather than a deficit? Cultural competence is not about holidays and ethnic food festivals or making collages of people of color who achieve success. It is about first knowing ourselves as cultural beings whose beliefs, behaviors, and most cherished assumptions are the result of our own cultural upbringing. Only then can we begin to see the cultural differences in our students and colleagues without judging them and finding them wanting. Those of you whom we honor today are the ones who must not only become masterful at navigating this new educational landscape, but you are the ones who must complete its design and create the maps that those who come after you will use to guide them across this difficult but richly promising terrain. I want to end with a quote from Stephanie Case Marshall that I am hopeful will take with you in your hearts and minds as you leave here today. When we change the story, we change the map. When we change the map, we change the landscape. When we change the landscape, we change our experiences and our choices. When we change our experiences and choices, we can change our mind. And when we change our mind, we can change the world. Mind shaping is world shaping. This is your work. Your students, your schools, your systems, your nation are counting on you. And we know that you will succeed. Good luck and Godspeed.
Thank you.